John, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
buddy. I mean, you found it with no problem?
No problem.
Yeah, the GPS doesn't seem to work great up here, so I mean, it just sends people to the wrong place all the time.
Yeah, I was a little concerned about that because I don't get over to this neck of the woods too often, but got me right here. So,
well, and again, we tried to connect for a long time, and I know you're very busy, and you giving some time of your day, it means a lot. So, this is the most non-typical interview imaginable. So, Can I get the 3-minute tour of your childhood and where you grew up?
Oh, sure.
I'm assuming you're from Pittsburgh, although you didn't live here your entire life. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
yeah. Although it's kind of funny. So, yeah, I grew up in Ben Avon, went to Avonworth High School, graduated in the early 80s. Then I went to Georgetown University in D.C., graduated from there in the mid-80s. And came back here for law school and then lived out of town in Harrisburg for a couple of years. And I've been back since about 1992.
Right.
So that's the funny thing of it is, I go through this long rigmarole. I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh, yeah, you always lived here in Pittsburgh. And I'd be like, well, blah, 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 blah. And I realize I'm talking to somebody who's 30 years old and they were, I've been back here since they were born. So they could give two craps of what I did.
My friend, I feel your pain.
30 years ago.
I feel your pain too. Yeah, we've become that old man that we used to look at when we were younger. Like in that age, holy smacks! Like but you feel great. You look great. Yeah, it's. I tell my folks, my children. I say, hey, getting old is all up here.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
But they don't want to hear that because they're young. Youth is wasted on the young. So you, my friend, are the CEO and president of the Priory Hospitality Group.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And naturally, if you live in Pittsburgh, you've heard of the Priory Hotel, and you probably have heard of the Mansions on Fifth Avenue. Are those the two anchor businesses in there?
Right. Those along with our Grand Hall at the Priory, which is also on the north side. We do a lot of big events there, wedding receptions, things like that.
Is that connected to the hotel? Because I have not been there.
They are connected, yes.
Okay. But
yes.
they're run as separate entities?
No, they're the same entity. But,
okay.
We've got the event side and we've got the hotel side.
So let's talk about the Priory. So this property, if I understand your story correctly, was acquired by your parents?
Right. Yeah. My mom and dad acquired the Priory property, which had been a monastery and had served as a rectory.
Okay.
For the former St. Mary's Church, which is now our Grand Hall. They acquired it back in 1984 from PennDOT.
From PennDOT?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what had happened was PennDOT had acquired the property from the Catholic Church, from the diocese, with the intention of raising it to make way for Interstate 279. And then, as it turns out, there's another parish just up the street, maybe half a mile up East Street, that went and they fought like crazy. They filed lawsuits and all this stuff. And they ended up getting the highway rerouted. So the highway got rerouted for St. Boniface Church, which is still there and still active.
Okay.
And it ended up saving our buildings. So then that had to go out to public auction so that people could come in and bid on it.
So your parents' background, just briefly, why? Just so we can understand why they were interested in acquiring the property.
That was just a little craziness, But they liked historic buildings, and my dad's family was my great-grandfather is a Swiss immigrant, and he lived in Troy Hill. And so a lot of the Germans from that part of the north side had gone to St. Mary's, which was a German congregation, primarily German-speaking.
Okay.
And so he kind of felt a connection with it. So he and my mom took a flyer on it. They didn't really have any idea what to do with the property, to tell you the truth, but they just went and got it. As a matter of fact, he tells a pretty good story where he was in the UK. He worked for Ketchum Communications, which was a big advertising agency in Pittsburgh at the time. And he was in the UK for some kind of acquisition negotiations or something like that. And my mom was here. My mom's a homemaker. She's raising myself and my two younger brothers. And they discussed a limit as to what she could go and bid on this thing. So she goes to the auction and uncharacteristically goes to pick him up at the airport, because back in the, in the 80s, there's no cell phones for sure.
Right.
And overseas communication was really, really expensive. So she hadn't talked to him. So she picks him up, which was not short of, it wasn't extraordinary, but it was not too far short of extraordinary. She usually took a cab home, right? So anyway, so she goes and picks him up, and she said, well, we bought a church. What are we going to do with it? So that was the story there.
As he gets off the plane.
As he gets off the plane. We bought a church.
So they were just intrigued with the building.
Yeah.
They had no designs on what it was going to be.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then from the time they acquired it to the time that they started the renovations, how long was that approximately?
It wasn't too long, really. It was about a year. A friend of theirs had worked at St. Francis Hospital, which is now the new Children's Hospital in Bloomfield.
Right.
And so she worked for a doctor there, and she said, you know, there's not a whole lot of lodging around St. Francis. She says, you got Allegheny General Hospital over there on the north side, and there's no hotels over on that side of the river. You know, you might want to consider doing like kind of a European-style hotel. So they thought about it, and that's what they did.
Right.
So that was where the conception of the idea came from. Yeah.
What year did it open?
So we opened at the end of '86, and the
Okay.
renovation started beginning of '86.
Oh, that's pretty fast.
So yeah,
So within a year you were opened.
Well, they acquired it in '84,
Right.
and it took a while to get the capital raised and that
Got
kind
it.
of stuff, and get the architectural drawings done. But the construction was faster than you would have thought.
The name Priory, where'd that come from?
It's a name for a place where clerics live,
Right.
in communion. So you may remember the prioress tale from
Yes.
the Canterbury Tales.
Yes.
So that was the prioress
Okay.
of a priory in England. Yeah.
Okay. So it was a traditional English religious based term, I should say.
It's one that you see in England, and there are all kind of places called the Priory in England, and throughout the United Kingdom. There's a Priory Hotel there
Okay.
that occasionally we get correspondence for.
Got it. Got it.
Wrong place. One time somebody left us a bad TripAdvisor review, and I'm like, this isn't our place. We don't have this.
So your folks decide to get into the hospitality business, and you're at the time approximately just out of school?
22, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your initial thoughts? Were you this is something you were interested in?
I was like, they were nuts, man.
I love the honesty.
and the thing was, it's funny. They started this project. They were in their late 40s, and my mom had been a kindergarten teacher for about 3 years, and then was a homemaker after that. So she had no hospitality experience at all. And I mean, to her credit, she went and took courses at Robert Morris, and then did an externship at the Swickley. What was the place called? The Swickley Country Inn. It was right on 65.
right across the river from here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that place.
Yeah, it's unfortunately torn down now.
Yeah.
But so she's there learning how to make a bed and all this kind of stuff. And I always admired her a lot for that.
So she went back and got the necessary skills.
She did.
Hands-on.
Mm-hmm. And she had a really, one thing that, even to this day, you can't teach it, but the kind of spirit of hospitality, right, which is a gracious, welcoming spirit. Well, she always had that. So that
Right.
part, was down, but she did need to learn the technical aspect of, how do you run a place?
Did they, especially in the early years, did they actually run it, your father and your mother, as a unit together? Were they both like invested in the day in, day out operations?
No, my dad was not involved at all, except to stroke checks here and there. And
He stayed to catch them?
he did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he retired from there in the mid-'90s. But what's funny is my mom used to, so that she could buy, little antiques and that kind of stuff, accent pieces, would go and do the grocery shop, and then would write the check for like an amount in excess of what the grocery bill was, and then she'd pocket the money so she could put it towards some trinket or something she could then stow into the hotel.
You have to admit, I mean, that is not the it's not a common business to go into.
No.
So you're looking around at your friends and you're like, well, what do your parents do? What do you do? What do your parents do this? Well, mine opened a hotel. I mean, that had to be for sure. And you went to Georgetown, correct?
I did, yes.
And your law degree at Pitt?
Right.
Is that correct? So are you telling me that you want to be a lawyer because you didn't want to be in the hotel business?
No, I just always wanted to be a lawyer. It wasn't really a conscious decision not to go into that.
You wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And why did you want to be a lawyer?
You know what?
Do you remember?
Well, I do. I loved the old Perry Mason TV show.
Okay.
I used to watch that, in reruns, of course, but I would watch that show. I loved it. It's kind of the courtroom back and forth and stuff like that. So,
okay.
So that's what drew me to law school.
And then you probably became an attorney and go, huh? Lots changed in 30, 40 years.
Well, there's a great difference between what you see on TV and what goes on behind the curtain at a law firm,
Yeah. Did you like the adversarial nature of the practice of law?
I did. I like the intellectual challenge of it, learning an area of the law, digging into the facts of a particular case. And then I like the adversarial part of it, but also the, going and trying to convince somebody of the rightness of your point. So there was an advocacy aspect to it that I found to be very challenging too. So,
this was business law?
Yeah, it was like business litigation.
Okay.
Yeah. And I liked it for quite some time, but I ended up practicing for about 12 years.
Okay.
And then grew just kind of disenchanted with it, and that's not casting aspersions at any practicing attorneys. I use them all the time, and I'm glad for them. It wasn't the thing for me. I wasn't happy.
Okay, and you could recognize that at some point in time. Was there one moment where you realized this is not what I want to do anymore?
Well, there was. I was trying to get away on a short vacation. Our kids were little, and we went up to Niagara Falls, and I had left something that needed to be served on somebody, but I didn't want it served too soon. So some bright bulb had gone and picked this thing up, ended up serving it ahead of time so that the person that we were serving got, in essence, advance notice of it. So I get a call. I'm up, at the falls. I mean, literally the water's coming down. And I get a call from my client who's furious. Like, how did this possibly happen? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
It was something outside my control. But kind of my feeling on it was, geez, I can't get away for 3 days up to Niagara Falls with the family here without some catastrophe happening. So I was like, I got to start doing something different.
So at that moment, did you decide that you wanted to turn your attention to the hotel?
Well, I talked to my wife about it, and she'd worked at the hotel and at the Grand Hall too, on and off. Throughout the years. Okay. And I said, what do you think? Would it be a good fit? The problem for us was going to be a big, big step back. In income.
Sure.
So we were really going to have to, kind of tighten our belts for a while. But yeah, it ultimately, the decision kind of made itself.
Okay. So, because again, you were actually going into a family, going to turn your direction back into a family business. And usually kind of like people go the other direction. Usually they get into it, immerse for a period of years, and then they find themselves yearning to get out of it.
Right. Yeah. No, this is a different course for sure. And, I had a frank conversation with my mom, and I'm kind of like, we can't have kind of two chiefs here. So,
sure.
Part of this deal is going to be you're going to need to step aside because people are going to get the wrong message.
Oh, sure.
At some point. So we had a kind of an interregnum period where we were both there. And it was kind of fun in a way, but the mixed message thing got to be troublesome because we'd have team members who would go and I'd tell them to do something. They'd go around to my mom and say, John wants me to do this and blah, 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 blah. And she can't countermand the decision. And I'm like, well, we just can't do that. We need to speak with one voice here.
The style of the hotel being that is it correct for me to say it's a boutique hotel?
Right.
Is that correct? Because I know that your word boutique is used a lot, even in my business. Some brokers are small and they call themselves boutique real estate brokers. Okay. But it truly is in the essence of a hotel. It is a boutique hotel. And it's modeled after a more, like you mentioned, a European style.
Yes. Yeah. The model that we have, so we have 42 guest rooms at the Priory Hotel. We started out in 86 when we were going way back then with 25, and then we built an addition about 10 years ago. And so we've got 42 rooms, and, the model we have, which is we're not affiliated with any national brand or anything. It's family owned and operated. And that's a business model that's pretty common in Europe, right? You go to a little tourist town or even to a big city, and you might stay in a place with 30 rooms and it's got a little bar tucked in there and everything.
Right.
And it's owned by some family. And it's much more rare to see these big nationally flagged hotels, certainly, once you get out of the bigger cities. And so that European style was 100% what my folks were trying to copy. And I think to this day, that's what we try and bring to the table, which is, very high level of personalized service, a little quirkiness. It's not every rough edge of ours is filed down.
Mm-hmm.
There is no corporate coming in and.
They call that old world charm, don't they?
Old world charm, right? Yes.
Well, the hotel model, I think most Americans are familiar with, even if they're not even paying attention. You just know that it's connected with the brand, right?
Right.
From the low budget hotels all the way up to your Ritz-Carltons, it is a brand.
Right.
So this is a different experience.
It is, and it's it's kind of a rare bird. I think. At least right now that I can think of it, our two properties, the Mansions on 5th and the Priory, are the only independent hotels in the city of Pittsburgh and probably just outside of it too. Because there's even some kind of loose affiliation hotels. There's the Industrialist, which is downtown in the old Barrett building, for instance. But they've got an affiliation with Marriott. They're an autograph property, so we don't have that affiliation at all.
So you're purely independent.
We are purely independent. We are part of a nationwide points network for
travelers.
So it's a rewards network for independent hotels. So you can't.
Oh, I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. It's called Stash Hotel Rewards, and it's a nice program. And people like kind of interesting, quirky properties. They've got some great ones. Kind of their flagship is the Lenox Hotel, which is right.
I know that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, big, grand hotel, and it's right on Boylston Street in the Back Bay of Boston.
Yeah, I've heard of that before. So it's a loose association of independent hotels,
right,
in an effort to reward guests and almost encourage them to try independent hotels as well too.
Well, and I feel also like if they're points hounds, that they're not missing out on something. So
is that a big thing? Because I'm not a traveler anymore. It was decades prior, but is the points thing a huge issue with travelers now?
It's massive. Yeah.
Okay.
And probably the two strongest programs. Well, Marriott's by far the most strong.
Okay.
And then Hilton is pretty strong as well. But Marriott's got 31 or 32 brands now.
Wow.
Many of which you wouldn't even know
wow.
were Marriott brands. So Westin is part of the Marriott network. All the Sheraton hotels, that was part of a merger about 6-7 years ago, are part of that. So they're kind of the 800-pound gorilla.
Okay.
And it can be hard because a lot of people, and I don't blame them. I mean, they want to get points for future stays in a big network of hotels where, Ritz-Carlton is a Marriott product.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How long has that been? Do you know?
It's been quite some time.
Okay.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Right. So they want to build up to maybe an aspirational property like that. So, so for us, I think it's a great network. There's great hotels. I've had really good experiences with them.
Right.
And it allows us to sort of play in that sandbox, but there's no doubt that some of those programs are really strong.
Okay.
In terms of rewarding brand loyalty.
Okay, so you acquired the Mansions on 5th, and I think it was 2016.
Right.
Is that correct? So let's talk about that property.
Yep.
Well, first, I know it goes back to the early 1900s. Industrialists in town lived on that street, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
All the names you would know.
Carnegie's.
Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
George Westinghouse.
Okay.
So a lot of the.
But who lived in your particular building?
So our building was built by a fellow named Willis McCook and his wife Mary back in 1906, and they built it, more or less to be in the same neighborhood as all these other leading
Keeping up with
lights.
the Joneses.
Yes. And McCook he was a prominent attorney and also an industrialist himself, and had kind of made his bones as Henry Clay Frick's lawyer.
Okay.
So he, some of that Frick money, I guess, made
He's
its way over to him.
For sure.
And so he built this very grand house, and then next door on the same plot, he built another place that's about half the size for his daughter, who's just getting married at the same time. So there's 2 houses there, thus the plural mansions. Mm-hmm. And we run them now as a boutique hotel again, 22 guest rooms and 2 buildings.
Was the intent to buy the building to do exactly what you're doing with it?
Well, at the time, we didn't do the main renovation there. So I stepped in after the fact. There was a couple who had bought the buildings from the longtime owners, family. There had been a fire in the main house back in 2004 thereabouts, and so that building was vacant. And this couple came in and they did the primary renovations and opened it up, and then we stepped in about
that's what I thought
5 or 6 years later and sort of took it off their hands and sort of put our imprint on it, I guess you would say.
So a little bit about that. You have also a smaller ballroom there as well too. I guess can you call it a ballroom?
Yeah, you call it
reception room,
ballroom, reception room. That's where they used to have the big, their big parties and that kind of stuff. Is in that main big grand open area. And so what we'll do typically is, for a bigger event like a wedding reception or something, we'll just take the whole first floor of that main building and turn it into event space.
Got it. And to go back to the Priory, is the Grand Hall, is it 300 plus people? Did I read that right?
Yeah, we can seat about 350 with a dance floor. It's a little tight, but it's a pretty big ballroom for for downtown. We're probably the third or fourth biggest.
Okay. And how big is the reception area on the Mansions on Fifth?
We can seat about 120.
Okay.
There, so it's a good bit smaller.
Before we get to service, I do want to talk to you about service. When you compare the 2 hotels, let's say first impressions, person sees them both. What are the major differences?
The main thing I would say is that the Mansions has a certain grandeur to it that kind of the second you walk through the door, you're like, whoa, I've kind of walked back into time, into turn of the...
It's like stately? Is that a good word?
That is a good word. You kind of feel like you've walked back into that Gilded Age. Because it's really been lovingly restored, so it looks very much like it did back in its heyday. And when you walk in, you walk directly into that main room. So you see the tall ceilings, you see all the polished wood and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you walk into the Priory, and it's a little more. It's more light for sure, but it doesn't have that kind of like.
Not a lot of heavy woods?
No. As a matter of fact, we just did renovations there that were supposed to take about 6 months. They took 18 or so.
Of course.
It was right during and then after the pandemic, so we were caught up in a lot of those supply chain issues.
Yes.
So it took a long time. But anyway, so we redecorated with the idea of being really to kind of make it brighten up the interior quite a bit. So, we took out a lot of what kind of was our signature color, which was like a maroon, like a dark maroon, gold, dark green. Mm-hmm. Took all that out and was coming in with much more light blues, with the idea almost to create kind of like a beach resort feel to it. Yes.
Okay.
So our thought was not so much to be captive to sort of the history of the building. It was built in 1888, so it's a Victorian era building. But I think our idea was, well, let's let the interior features speak for that.
Got it.
Right? You can see that there's 14-foot ceilings, and there are tin ceilings. And
right.
So you can see that. You can see the carved wood. You can see the woodwork. And let's be a little more fun and playful with kind of what we put in it, which would be the furnishings and that kind of stuff.
Well, that move further created more differences between the two hotels then by doing that.
It definitely did. Yes, it's there's much more traditional feel at the Mansions, and we redecorated there too. We put in all new furniture in the common areas, but it's definitely of a kind of the grand stuff, heavy that you would expect to see in a place that an industrialist built back in 1906.
So I think most of us, when we think of the concept of hospitality or hotel service, the more you pay, you should be treated better. I think that's ingrained in the consumer. Maybe I'm wrong. That's how I certainly was ingrained in me. When you have a boutique hotel, the building is a lot of the spectacle, a lot of the draw, I would imagine too. But I would imagine a different kind of service, a different level of service is probably at the forefront.
It is. And a lot of it's paying attention and asking the right questions and anticipating needs. And so we really try and train our team members to be not just saying, oh, how can I help you, but to anticipate a need. So if somebody comes in with a baby, but they don't have a porta-crib, it's like, man, do you think you might need a porta-crib? Thinking about that. So, or if we have a housekeeper who's out, rather than just saying to the guest, oh, how's your stay so far? Which, is good engagement anyway, but how's your stay so far? But can I get you any additional towels? I mean, something like that. Do you need some additional pillows? Mm-hmm. Those are the requests that we get a lot. And so, we can suss that out, because a lot of times people don't want to, they don't want to feel like they're putting somebody to bother. Mm-hmm. But if you're going and asking that question, you're saying, listen, you may need some more towels. And if you do, I'm happy to go get them for you.
Yeah, it's another level of attentiveness, that I think is probably lost today with chains. I mean, our family, when we do travel, my wife's in the airline business, so she's always in hotels. But when we do travel intentionally, we do stay at better hotels throughout the country because, it's an experience for us. But our biggest complaint over the years, John, has been like the level of quote unquote service didn't match what we actually paid. We felt that way as consumers.
Right.
Like you feel that's ebbing away to a degree.
Yeah, and I think it's important to drill that home to the team members, and also to get the right team members in place too. Some is just a personality, right?
Right.
So if you get somebody that's, kind of naturally kind of a Debbie Downer, or whatever, then maybe being a front desk associate is not like the right seat on the bus for that person.
Right. So. You hear that, fast food industry? There's a little lesson for you. Huh?
Right.
I don't know what your experience is when you go into those. I imagine it's not often, but yeah, our front level customer service in America has certainly changed over the years in a lot of industries.
Well, it has, and I think some has gotten worse recently too, because it's hard to get anybody to work, much less get somebody that really is adept and interested in pleasing a guest.
It's got to be a great opportunity for you, though, too, in one way. If the expectations of the public continues to get lower when it comes to service, is it ripe for the opportunity to really make an impact, I would think.
Well, that's a good point. And the funny thing is that if you say in terms of cost, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to go and anticipate a need to help somebody. And what we try and drill into people is if we can help somebody, do it. And that might mean, if we have somebody that comes in and they don't like the feel of a mattress, although all our mattresses are brand new, just so you know. But just by way of example, if somebody will come in and say, well, that mattress is too firm for me or something, and they're in, say, a room with just one queen bed. Well, I mean, if we've got 5 king rooms open, say, you know what, we'll get you in a different room, and guess what we'll do? We're going to upgrade you as well. And so, we could put them in another queen, but now you've sort of surprised and delighted them by saying, oh, well, you know what? We've got another room available. Why don't you have that one too? And it's got a little more space and it's a bigger bed. So,
and that always yields to more business,
right?
I mean, that's not at the forefront while you're doing it, but that goodwill, that level, people do not forget that stuff.
No, they don't. And one thing I've learned too over the years is that a lot of times people may not notice something or be looking for it rather, but if you go and it's there, they're like, oh my goodness, I'm really glad they thought of that, so that again is sort of that surprising and delighting type aspect.
Do you have certain market segments that you folks cater to? Like, is it a business sector? Is it an educational sector downtown? Who are your primary clients?
Well, during the for one thing, just for the record, our business mix changed quite a bit after the pandemic. So we're seeing a lot fewer business travelers than we used to. Mm-hmm. But, we would get people that like the interesting and the offbeat and places that were, that aren't recreatable elsewhere. Kind of a one-of-a-kind stay. And that's for both properties, both for the Priory and for Mansions on Fifth. And so they like and appreciate that. And, they may be points junkies, but, okay, well, this looks like an interesting place. Let's try it. So we would get that segment of business traveler, and it would be people going downtown or to some of the North Shore businesses, sometimes out the 28 corridor. And then we get, especially in the warmer months, a ton of leisure travelers. Okay. So we get a ton of ball game guests. As a matter of fact, the Phillies were in town over this last weekend. And Phillies, if they're good, are a really good draw.
Okay.
And we had a lot of Phillies fans.
Okay.
And even the last couple of days, we've had some Detroit fans in. People love the ballpark. They like the ease of the city. And the Pirates are a relatively inexpensive ticket, mm-hmm, and mm-hmm, their chances of their team prevailing are, not so bad. So we get a lot of Pirates people, and then what we're seeing now is a lot of the demand we're getting is event driven too, though.
Okay.
So that leisure traveler was coming in, we might see for 3 or 4 days, and they're coming in from, say, Canada, just because they'd read something about Pittsburgh in a newspaper.
Right.
We're not seeing as many of that type traveler these days, but what we're really seeing are the event travelers. So these are people coming in for a concert,
right,
something of that nature.
Right.
And those have been good draws for us.
Okay.
Taylor Swift, which I'm not
imagine.
Creating any revelations here, was a massive, massive draw to the city. And even now, some of these big country music artists.
Oh, sure.
Luke Combs was here back in the spring. So he's a big draw. Beyonce was supposed to be here this month,
right?
And unfortunately, she canceled. But some of these big name acts, Ed Sheeran was here, and
mm-hmm,
they do a good job of driving people to this city.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, it's like we had decades prior, it was the Grateful Dead was the only band that people were crazy about following around, but now it seems like people will travel for music.
Yeah.
On a drop of a hat now.
Yeah, well, those big time country acts really draw well, and with Beyonce, I'm a little baffled. I don't know if they weren't selling enough tickets or what. It's a shame it's not.
Yeah, I saw it was canceled. I thought it was a medical thing. Maybe it isn't. No one knows.
I don't know for sure. I'm speculating.
Okay, so event crowds are a good source of business for you. I think I read somewhere where you had mentioned that universities as well too, with the major universities in town, and they're bringing educators in and out. And is that right?
At the Mansions on Fifth, yes. We see a ton of guests from the university community. Especially from Carnegie Mellon, because it's only about 2 blocks away.
Got it.
So you can very easily walk up to campus.
Got it.
If you're inclined. So we see a lot of folks from CM, yeah. And that's been a really good, fruitful relationship for us.
I read somewhere that you were, I don't know if it was a renovation or when you were opening, wasn't there a deadline because there was a Penguin game going on?
Oh, right.
Weren't you against a hard date for something?
Right. That was our new addition that we built onto the Priory, and that was 2010. Opening day was 2011, so we had to have rooms ready for the first. And the reason we had to have them was we had a wedding in.
That's what I read
from New Year's Day. Okay. And what happened was it was the day of that first Winter Classic, which was going to be played on New Year's Day, and so the whole city was sold out. So if we couldn't accommodate these guests,
got it. You had to find a place for them.
We were going to have to put them out. Who knows where? Monroeville or past there.
Wow.
And there would have been a lot of egg on our face. So they got the rooms done, but literally like the contractors were putting the sinks in that morning. And then we had to go in, put all the furniture together.
Oh my gosh.
Make the beds, wipe everything down, put down the amenities and things of that nature.
Before your guests checking at
Before
4.
people come in at 3 o'clock. And so we were checking people in, and literally
That's a bad scramble.
I'm in there like running the sweeper as they're coming in. I'm like, okay, we're just done with this one. Nobody's ever stayed in here before, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good story. I mean, that's a good memory. It has to be, I mean, and that's the beauty, I think, of an independent hotel, that, you're not going to have that kind of, I don't know, story, I guess, is a difficulty. There's just a beauty to that.
Well, and what was nice about it was that, everybody kind of came together. So we had team members who were working on, what's a holiday, because they wanted to see the place get open. So people, not that they were volunteering their time, but they didn't have to be there.
Understood.
And my parents, who just live a couple doors away, I had some of my cousins come over because they were over there for New Year's, and they came over to help out putting beds together and things like that. So it ended up being kind of a funny and enduring memory. It was. Yeah.
So you became an entrepreneur by leaving law. So, it's been, was it 20 years? 20
right.
years.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What was your impressions of an entrepreneur? Because you're obviously a business attorney. What entrepreneurship was before you went in there, and now 20 years later. Can you talk about differences from perception to reality?
Well, the one thing I probably should have better educated myself about was access to working capital.
Okay.
And
okay.
having cash available, that if something comes up or you're short of cash some week and you need to plug a hole, that you got access to cash that you can go and do that. Because
right.
I was not really thinking of that. And so things would come up where we might get a big bill, like an insurance bill that might be $25,000 or something.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, where's that going to come from, right? And so then I started looking at my own line of credit, and then that's where it came from. So,
got it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I do. I'll occasionally talk to groups of, like high school kids and mm-hmm. things like that about entrepreneurship. And one thing I say is, come into this thing with the understanding that you're going to need access to cash from time to time, because there is, you're looking around for like, hey, who's going to plug this hole? And there's nobody there but you. You're
correct.
You are the one that's got to plug it. And if you don't have access to that liquidity, then the machine stops real quick. And that, I think a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up on that, because, they may even have a profitable business,
right?
But they have a cash crunch and they can't get past it, and then all of a sudden they're out of
they're not planning for the rainy day, because the rainy days do come, and that's And I talk to entrepreneurs, and they share a similar story with me, in that when you're an early entrepreneur, it seems like when things are going great, there's a delusion that they're always going to be that way, and just better, maybe even better, because we never plan for the eventuality, and there's an ebb and flow to everything in this world. And I didn't get it. It took me a long time to figure that out.
Right. And, really you're the one too who has to kind of keep your eye on, what's the future hold? What are these, what are your leading indicators? And that's interesting you raised that point. Back in, say, 2011, 2012, we were just coming out of that 2008 recession, and Pittsburgh was booming as a hotel market, really doing great. We're well outstripping our competitive set, which would be like St. Louis, Milwaukee, and, kind of banging down the doors of hotspots like Miami, Las Vegas. We're just doing great occupancy, rates are great. And I was like, oh, this is great, man. Well, what happened was we came online with about another 3,500, 4,000 guest rooms, Center City.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from 4,000 hotel rooms to 7,500. Well, the market just wasn't going to absorb that fast enough. The market was growing, but it wasn't absorbing it. So everybody kind of felt that. And I'm talking about from the biggest hotels downtown to the places out, the chain places out on like Banksville Road or someplace. Mm-hmm. Everybody was feeling it because there's too much product chasing too few guests.
Like a glut.
There was a glut. And so what happened was, you're making less money because you have fewer. Even though as a whole the market might have more people staying there,
right?
Your particular place has fewer. Plus, they're getting it at a lesser rate because you're, dropping rate to the extent that you want to or can to generate occupancy.
Right.
At some point you can, in the hotel business, you can go and drop rate way too much, and there's, you hurt your brain. There's all kinds of bad stuff.
Yeah, that's the balancing act, right? I mean, I can think of major brands over the decades that have lost some of their prestige in the market because that particular name was used by the conglomerate to mean something different now, to mean at low budgets, and at one time it was an intermediary hotel, and now it's down in the, that can happen.
Right, absolutely.
Intentionally or unintentionally, I would imagine.
Right. And, you damage the brand, and ultimately you're not making as much money. So it's always a balancing act when it comes to that kind of driving occupancy through rate. It's you can really hit the third rail with that one.
I would think. With the airlines, there's a level of cooperation with them when they have to displace or passengers or shuffle them around other airlines because they just don't have capacity or they've canceled flights. Is it the same in hotel business, or do you have a working relationship with the other major players in town that if you need to put people places or vice versa, is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah. By and large, if they need to, in the industry, they call that walking somebody. So if they have to walk somebody, and we've got relationships with a number of hotels where we've got sort of an agreed upon rate.
Okay.
Because that hotel is going to pay for that guest room night. So It's coming out of their pocket. And you want to your point, have sort of a reciprocal arrangement that, if you somehow or other something bad happens and you need to walk somebody, that you're not getting put through the ringer.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
When you have to walk them. For
sure.
us, we don't overbook. Most hotels do, but we do not overbook. So normally if we're walking somebody, it's sometimes the power grid goes out or something. And
so help me understand this. You just said most hotels overbook. So to the layman on the street, that's actually meaning that we have 100 rooms. We're going to make reservations for 103 all the time, feeling that 3 or more are not going to show. That's
right.
How the numbers work.
Right.
That's kind of risky.
Yeah, well, it is, because you end up with some really unhappy guests and they show up and there's not a room for them and they've got a reservation. And that's the reason we don't do it. I don't want to bet on somebody
sure
not coming in and then, put one of my team members in a position to, sheepishly explain what happened.
Yeah, so that's commonplace in the industry then.
It is.
I was not aware of that.
Absolutely, yes.
I know it's commonplace in the airline industry.
Well, it's the same thing. It's 100% the same thing. And that's why if you're going to a hotel, a lot of times, if you think you're going to be late getting in there later in the evening, it's worthwhile to call and say, hey, listen, I just want to confirm I'm going to be there tonight. I'm going to be arriving at about 10 o'clock. If you could make a note in the reservation.
Got it.
So that they know that you're going to show up. And
got it.
Yours isn't the room that gets, that gets the plug pulled.
Little inside maneuver there.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the eating and drinking experience at both of your hotels.
Well, we, in terms of food and beverage, we have bars at both hotels, and both are very cocktail forward.
Got it.
Both our primary mixologists do some really great cocktails, and they're long time in the industry, really do a great job. So we're kind of known for that. In terms of that day-to-day food part of it, we do typically just a very stripped-down bar menu for food, just because one thing is I don't want to have a kitchen there and worry about running a restaurant day in, day out. The other part of it is that we used to, at both places, have somewhat larger menus, but it turned out we weren't selling that much of it because, with the advent of DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that kind of stuff, people were just ordering out, which is fine with us. We've no problem with it, but I don't want to compete with them either. So,
right.
So we just do like a light fare, and then we do a lot of catered events.
Got it.
And a lot of wedding receptions, showers, private dinners, all kinds of things like that. And we'll do full food service for that in-house.
So let me ask you this. You've been in the business long enough. Have you seen the metamorphosis of like boutique beer? There's been a metamorphosis in terms of the user experience with alcohol. Like it's become more it can be more upscale. It just seems like, and I think that would fit perfect with your boutique hotel as well too.
It does, yes. And so on the beer side, we're not so great on that because we don't have taps at either place.
Right.
So we have the product available, but you're getting it out of a bottle. But in terms of that craft cocktail revolution, which happened, here in Pittsburgh, maybe late 2000s.
Yep.
That's been it's been really great for us because it kind of gives our team members a chance to sort of shine with that.
Sure.
And we have some things. We have a Monktini that's a
Monktini.
Yeah. At the Priory, that's a specialty.
That is great.
Drink. And
that is great. Does it come in a goblet?
It comes in a martini glass, believe it or not. But it's made with Chambord. So it's pretty tasty. And so it gives us kind of a leg up on other places that we can kind of create these signature drinks. And you'd be absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, before I used to be like, okay, well, let's have these high-end scotches in here and all this stuff. And people's tastes have really changed to these sort of craft cocktails.
Right.
So we're selling a ton of those at both places.
I bet.
As opposed to somebody sitting down with that high-end Talisker or something that might be a $15 glass of whiskey.
Right.
But they'd rather have that cocktail that it takes somebody a while to make.
I think it's an experience too. And that's where I think, the younger generations and those in their 20s and 30s, I mean, I think they enjoy it's part of their night out experience. And it seems to be a trend. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, and it's something you can't really get at home.
Good point.
So that's
good point.
You could try it and maybe you're pretty good at it, but you may not ever be as good as somebody that makes them all the time.
Oh yeah, and you have a favorite bartender for favorite drinks, and people say, "Hey, we go here for this, and we go there for that," and but that is different than 20, 30 years ago. The experience is different,
right?
I totally get that. What about managing people?
That's a lot of fun.
Well, it's part of the entrepreneur journey, my friend, as you know.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, so, and again, I don't want to drill down with anyone in particular. I'm just really asking in general, how has that changed? You got 20 years in it now, John.
Well, that was a big eye-opener for me, coming in and trying to figure out how to motivate, train, hire the right line employees. People are going to come in and work hourly. When you're an attorney, basically you might manage a secretary and you might manage a paralegal and you manage yourself. Right. Or maybe you've got a few younger attorneys you're supervising. But there's no, everybody there is relatively well compensated. They're professionals.
Sure.
They don't want to lose their job. They can't easily get another job like that. So,
right.
There's some stickiness there that you don't otherwise have. So a lot of it is trying to get that right person in place that has the right personality, that has an attention to detail. Mm-hmm. And it's a constant, battle to try and get those right people in. Mm-hmm. One thing I found too is that what's funny is I'll get people in who I think are superstars, for like maybe a year, and then some wire will blow or whatever, and they do something really weird. And,
okay.
I had a young woman who was housekeeper and was really good. And I wanted to track her into, doing some other jobs and maybe trying to get her up into management. And she got into a beef with one of her coworkers and like changed out the ingredients in one of her spray bottles, like one of the cleaning bottles, to something that was like kind of not toxic but could hurt her. And
wow.
Yeah, and we found out about it. We're like, what are you thinking? She's like, well, I was mad. And we're like, well, you can't have that. And she had to go.
Right.
And this was like a superstar.
Right.
So, you get weird stuff like that. But we've been really blessed that we've got some really good team members. And if you're in a small organization like ours too, I think a lot of people maybe have had this experience where you kind of have a certain way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And it's not the way for everybody. At our place, we try and give people a lot of responsibility. We want them to grow and we want them to make their own decisions. And you can't have your hand held all the time. And
think on your feet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's not for everybody. So we've had people who look like superstars on paper come in and they just don't work out well because they don't respond to that environment very well.
It's almost like a mini entrepreneurial mindset, what you're looking for. They want to be able to think on their feet and have some empowerment, make decisions, good decisions.
Right. And so we do say to people too, if you make a decision, we're going to back you up on it always.
Right.
I mean, unless it's something
right.
truly beyond the pale.
Right.
But if it's a situation where we disagree with that decision, we're not going to, in front of a guest or in front of your coworkers, say, oh, how could you be so stupid? What we're going to do is, we'll go through and talk about it and say, well, here's how we would have handled this. But we're backing you up 100%. So, let's say a front desk associate goes and like comps somebody's room night for something that was a relatively small, minor thing. And you're like, well, this didn't really ruin their trip, did it? I wouldn't have given them the whole room, maybe give them a discount or give them a room upgrade or something.
Right.
So, we try and coach people into, kind of what the parameters are, but you have to make your own decisions because if you're on the phone to a manager all the time too, everybody goes bonkers.
Do you see any changes in even the last 20 years in terms of just, the employee differences or attitudes with new hires? Is it different?
Well, one thing I was really surprised about was coming out of the pandemic, how hard it was to get younger people in to work. So, and this is across the industry too. So I have friends who I talked to who had very, very similar experiences.
Sure.
And, we were doing we created an internship. Basically, I need people to work. So this is for like college students, that could come in. We pay them full time, $20 an hour. And what we're going to do is over the course of this summer, we're going to train you in every aspect of running a hotel and a ballroom. Mm-hmm. So that, when you get out into the real world, you can't manage a housekeeping staff if you can't do their job.
Absolutely.
You'll never get the respect of serving staff if you've never served. So the idea was to give them kind of on-the-job training for that aspect of it and have some, that there'd be a pedagogical aspect to it too. So we'd be teaching them as we go along, but that they'd be doing actual work. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get anybody. I put this out to 4 or 5 different universities to post, and I got not one inquiry. And I went and I reached out to. We had a young woman hired who had been she'd been a barista at a coffee place, and I was going to bring her on, and she was making maybe $10-12 an hour as the barista plus whatever tips they would get, and we were going to pay her more than double that, and put her on a management training track, and she ended up ghosting us. She agreed to come. She was going to, and just never showed up on the first day. And this was somebody that had been referred into us too.
I heard that's a thing. Wow.
So that was something that talking to colleagues had the same thing happen. So things have straightened out a little bit more, but I was really baffled by that because to me, I saw it as a great opportunity for somebody looking to break in.
Well, it sounds like it.
To hospitality, yeah.
I mean, it's just the starting wage you're paying alone,
Right. Well, and plus, if you're a kid who's living at home,
it's a perfect opportunity.
Yeah, you're making $1,000 a week or something.
Exactly. The question that I always have to wonder with people out seeking new hires today, if you had to critically try to analyze it, is it just, because I think people are generally good. That's the premise I go by, John. People are generally good. There's trends and things that happen, but ultimately, is there less incentive to work now, do you think? Is there a different mental framework with a younger generation? They look at work differently? Like, I really am trying to dig down and find out what is going on right now, because something the last couple of years is just off. Right.
Yeah. I think there's a level of contentedness where, in the case I was just describing, where we had somebody younger, that somebody else is taking care of them, so they can, more or less take it or leave the job, right? And they're less concerned about creating a career for themselves. They're sort of content to kind of bob along. And so, yeah, I've been seeing that. So it's just like, are they getting the means to sort of get by? So, do they have parents that they can live off of, or a significant other, or is there government assistance? A lot of people got enhanced unemployment compensation, which created a disincentive for jumping back into the employment ring. I think this market's eventually going to swing back some.
Sure. Do people still value work the same way?
It just depends on finding the right people.
Okay.
And so the ones that we have success with do. Right. And they like doing a good job. They find that rewarding in and of itself. And then, the other side of it is that they find some fulfillment in, one great thing about hospitality is, you're making people happy.
Yeah.
If you're doing your job,
indeed,
you're making people happy. So they like that too. And that goes from our housekeeping staff to our laundry staff to our front desk associates to our serving staff to our bartenders, whoever. If they're doing a good job, they're all part of one machine that delivers a really exceptional experience to somebody. And so, we get some really nice reviews on some of the review sites, Google, TripAdvisor. And people are very complimentary about the staff and about the cleanliness of the rooms. And that's everybody taking pride in what they do.
Sure.
So there are people out there. The question is, how do you find them, and how do you?
So it's harder to find them.
Yeah, it's harder to find them, and then part of it's keeping them too.
Yeah.
But we try and have a collaborative atmosphere, and we try and make people feel like they're part of something that's accomplishing something for the neighborhood, and that we all can be proud of.
Do you feel like, as an owner, you set the culture there, or do you guide the culture and you let the employees kind of create the culture? A little deep, but I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's important for the owner to set the standard. That this is how we treat each other. We've got to set a mission, vision, and values. And one of our most important values is, we want you to treat each other, you and your colleagues should be treating each other as clients. Meaning, if they have a need, it's your obligation to respond to that need, and not just, grudgingly throwing it at them.
Like an internal customer to you.
Precisely. Yeah. And so that you're delivering that service with a smile, you're doing it the right way. And so that's the culture we try and create, cultural respect. And, we treat people as individuals too. So if somebody has something befall them, we work with them, some kind of tragedy.
Sure.
We try and work with them to make sure that they're taken care of. And, So there's, kind of a family atmosphere there
Right.
too, that we're
Right.
looking out for each other.
And that's the benefit, I think, of having a boutique hotel or boutique organization, small organizations. You get to probably give some of that family culture where bigger organizations probably struggle with that a bit.
They do. Yeah. I mean, there's very much in a bureaucracy, there's a tendency to, everything's got a name and a number and that's it. It's
very procedural.
They're not looking at the whole individual. So we've had people who've had family members pass away and things unexpectedly.
Sure.
So we try and work with them to make sure that they're back on their feet.
Sure.
There's been times where somebody needed assistance, with funeral costs or something like that. We'd step in and do that. So, and the team will do that too. They've taken up, not through me, but in and of themselves, taken up collections,
right,
to help kind of offset somebody's
and I
costs.
think that speaks to the culture you've formed there,
right?
They have a quality of person that does that.
Yeah, right. You're thinking, how's this other person feel?
Right.
Yeah.
What do you love about this town, besides the fact you were born here?
Well, Pittsburgh, I think what's really cool about it is that there's all these kind of undiscovered little niches that, you can go and find out about. So I'm on Facebook and there's this Pittsburgh foodies thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of an interesting page. Some of it's pretty useless. People are like, oh, go to Giant Eagle for that. But somebody asked about, I don't know, like what's a good breakfast place or something. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't heard of that place or that place or that place. So I'm taking a screenshot of it so I can look it up later. Cool. So that there's all these little gems here and there. And, in some ways we're kind of part of that network that we've got these two little bars. You can wander in. Not some at the mansions. Sometimes we're closed for private events, but at the Priory, at our Monk's Bar, we're open every day of the year. So I say to people, 5 to 11 every day of the year, and if you get in a fight with your family on Christmas, and you
got a place to go,
looking for a sympathetic ear, here we are. We'll be here.
Yeah, I think too there is a trend that service does matter. It's funny, we might not give as much of it out today as the consumer wants, but I think the consumer wants it more than ever now. I think we're examining where we're spending our money and what are we getting for it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Right. Yeah. I mean, people are looking for value, and part of that value proposition is, how am I being treated as a customer or a guest?
Right.
And, what I try and preach to our team members is, if somebody's coming into the hotel, keep in mind, you don't know what's troubling them or what's, maybe nothing, but
that's a good point.
What we want them to do is the second they walk through that door, it's like somebody's come in, taken a big cloak off of them and seated them in front of a fire, that they're welcomed and they can feel like, okay, that cloak, whatever they were wearing, they can take off.
Right.
And they're here and they're safe.
Yeah. That's a good way of phrasing it. Yeah. I think that, and that's why the hospitality industry in general is always going to be a perfect industry for someone who has like natural empathy, someone who enjoys seeing their actions make somebody else happy. I think you're either kind of wired that way or you're not. But if you are wired that way, the hospitality industry is perfect because you're getting that feedback, and that's kind of what you're craving. Life isn't always about money. It's about that interaction, I think. And for people who crave that positive feedback, that you're in a perfect industry.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And it is kind of funny because we were talking a little bit about my legal career and then post-legal.
Right.
And, what's the difference? And, a lot of times I was making somebody's life miserable back when I was practicing the law. I was, and sometimes consciously doing it that way.
Right, right. It's the nature of the beast.
Well, you want to tell your client, I served them on Christmas Eve, stuff like that. Uh-huh. And the clients dig it, right? And then you start thinking about it like, oh, geez, am I kind of a jerk? I think I am. So, but here, I went and I kind of laugh, like back when I used to work, actually hands-on.
Right.
In the business. So I was managing small events. So I did my first wedding, and I was very meticulous about it.
Okay.
And I went and, I had all these checklists just to make sure everything was going to go the right way. I was meeting with the client, managed the team, and things went really well. The client was unbelievably happy, very complimentary of the team, and was really gratified, with how things had worked out. And I was like, this is great, So definitely that itch that you're talking about, definitely, it does scratch that that kind of gratitude from folks when you're able to do something for them that pleases them.
No, 100%. I personally, I learned in customer service, John, back in the late 80s, making a pittance. But I can talk on the phone and be nice to people, and they're happy, and I get paid. It was like the moment that just clicked, and everything that I've tried to do in my life had a component of like great human interaction, whether it was guitar sales or being a realtor, right? There's no happier people than the closing table,
right.
unless we're a divorce situation. But outside of that, generally, people are ecstatic. I'm the type of person that's wired that needs that positive human. I enjoy it. And I think most people, if you really ask them, I think most people are probably wired that way. It's like a component, and being in hospitality, I would imagine, is like, it's the perfect industry for that.
Right. Yeah. It's, if you're working at the front desk, it's, people are surprised, they're interested, they're, they want to hear about the history, they want to tour, that kind of stuff. So
you get a lot of people ask that when they come in.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's very cool.
And what's funny is over at the Priory, a lot of people want to come over and see they want to see the Grand Hall too, which is the former church.
Right.
And so our team's really good about taking them over there. It's like, what's a good time for you? Come down here at 8. I'll take you over and show it to you.
And that's very cool. Yeah, it's almost like it's like a tourist attraction for the town. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's if they're here, they want to see the whole enchilada.
Of course.
So, and our people will do it. And what's funny is this goes to sort of what we were talking about before, where it's a little bit outside their job description. They may not feel like taking somebody on this tour, but they do it, and they do it with a smile, and it does really make the the guests happy and makes them satisfied.
So your ownership of both the hotels span back 25 years now, 20 years?
20, yeah. I came into the Priory in 2002.
Okay, so the web was 95, 96 before it started to get proliferated. So you've watched this web mature, and you've seen the I guess I have to use the word phenomenon of the social medias, the positive and the negative. How important is the web, but more importantly, social media with, the promotion of your businesses?
Well, it's kind of funny you asked that, because my daughter, who's 29 now, and she called a couple of years ago, she was 27 or so, so she's of marrying age and interested in that kind of stuff. So she calls me kind of out of the blue. She says, have you seen your Instagram page? I'm like, no, not really. She's like, well, it sucks. And I'm like,
it's honest.
Well, what do you mean?
That's great.
So she says,
that is so great.
Nobody my age goes on Facebook. They're not, they may go to some websites, but if you're looking at social media, Instagram is where you need to be, and your presence is horrible. And so we took a look at it. We engaged the guy who's our webmaster, who offered to come on and take this over.
Okay.
And so he got in, and I had no idea how involved it was.
Right.
But with Instagram, I mean, there's a lot of reaching out to people you think may be good for you to know, and then you need to keep an eye on their posts so that you're liking their stuff. It's
a full-time gig.
They'll like you back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I or somebody else would post stuff up on Facebook here and there, and it was mainly bulletin board material, right? Like, oh, here's what we did yesterday, or we got this dinner coming up, come on out, that kind of stuff. Here's our drink special. But it wasn't very powerful. This Instagram has really, really been a powerful tool for us.
Because it's visual, I think.
It is.
What you do, you have two beautiful historic hotels, and there's, the tapestry of all of that it just begs to be shown visually.
Yeah.
The text doesn't matter as much as the visual does.
100%. And it's also hitting the right market. It's because our wedding clients are depending, but typically they're 25 to 35, right?
Right.
And those are the eyes that we need to hit. And if we're not there,
Got it.
So it's been a really good tool for us. So, there's expense involved in staying on top of it, but the platform's free, right? So,
bingo.
Yeah, so that's not bad. And then the internet itself and the hotel business is, is a sea change from, in a good way for us as an independent property.
Like for the reservations and things?
Exactly. Our visibility is much, much higher than it was back when, AAA may have been the only publication we were in. And then you're
dating us, John.
That's the truth. And then, you're maybe in a New York Times article or something from time to time.
Right.
But, we're out there on Booking.com. As listeners may know, Expedia owns just about all the other platforms.
Right.
They own Hotels.com and Orbitz.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They own most of them. So, and they're, like good and bad. They really give you a lot of visibility. But the problem is, from the hotel, you'd much rather people book directly through you. Of course. Because you're not paying a commission to them.
Yeah, for sure.
We signed out with Booking.com. They first came into the market. They were mostly European. And they came into the market maybe 2016 or thereabouts. Okay. And so I get my first bill from them. And what it was, I forget how much it was. It was about 15% commission, though, right?
That high?
Of the gross room rate. Yeah, and that was lower than Expedia.
Wow.
We get our first bill. It was like $4,500 for a month. I was like, how many rooms are they selling? And so I go through the report. I'm like, holy cow, I can't believe. So the trick of it is to, take advantage of it to fill rooms that you wouldn't otherwise fill, because I'd rather pay a commission on something than have it sit there empty and make nothing off of it.
Yeah.
But those have been really, that has been a big change to the industry, having those online travel agencies.
Yeah, because before the web, literally, it was you were picking up the phone and calling. How was it done? It's been so long. What was it just by phone?
Yeah, you'd buy like a city directory or something, and they'd have a list of hotels, and you go through and start, okay, where's this one located again?
That's right.
Times Square. Okay, we'll call them.
Wow, that's archaic.
Yeah, it's funny to think about.
I mean, that's how the world. Yeah. Do you ever, business aside for a second, personal? Do you ever sit and ponder what the before times, like what they were like? Do you remember? Do you romanticize ever about some of the fun of that era, or do you think we're just in a better place with the technology now?
I think we're in a better place. I do think about it though, but I think about, cell phones now. You don't have to meet somebody at a certain time at a certain place. You just call them and say, hey, listen, I'm about 5 minutes out. Can you, before you had to have these very detailed plans, if you're going to the movies or something like, okay, well, I'm going to be here. And if you're late or something happens, you're kind of, you're wondering what occurred. So that was,
how did we survive?
I think it's better. Yeah, you do wonder. And I was not a spring chicken back, when the internet started burgeoning. 30s, and
yeah. I mean, I think I'm right behind you in years, not by much. And I remember very clearly. I think the internet hit in 96, 95, 96. I was like 30, so I had 10 years of business experience. And how did we do it? I think I was selling pagers in downtown Pittsburgh and parking under the steel building with my pager bag and walking around to my appointments. And pagers was the latest technology. Right. It was fantastic, right? You look back, like, how did we, or leaving the house with the car, your parents just giving you the keys and waving at you and off you go. And you're not tethered.
Yeah.
There's just a different level of trust.
Right.
I don't know. I can't explain that to my children. I've tried to explain to my children what it was like, and that's just so foreign to them.
Yeah, well, especially I've got a 20-year-old, so he was born in 2000. I just turned 21, actually.
Right.
So he's born in 2002. And he, he's never not known the internet and stuff. And my older kids, I was talking about VHS tapes, and they're like, yeah, we remember VHS tapes. Don't you remember how we used to jerry-rig this portable VHS player into like our minivan when we go on vacation, plop in these Dragon Tales tapes or whatever. And,
best babysitter ever.
Yeah, but it was also like unbelievably dangerous because we like duct tape and bungee corded this thing in there. So they remember that pretty well. So I was like, okay, well, there's some analog technology that that they still recollect,
Yeah, the world is definitely it's faster now too.
Oh,
and I think about the pace that generation is used to. They would think that we were just dinosaurs if they got a little glimpse of what it was like, but we all seem to manage,
Well, right, and even with computers, when I got my first law job, I clerked for a federal judge for a couple of years after law school, and I was able to use a computer to type my own stuff up, drafts for the judge, stuff like that. And so I go to my first law firm job, and I'm like, well, where's my computer? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't have a computer. Why would you need a computer? You've got a dictaphone,
They were late to the party, huh? That firm was late to the party.
And they're typing away, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So,
yeah. I mean, is there any particular thing you see in your industry in 20 years that stands out as a change that from any major change in 20 years?
The one thing I could see is kind of the reduction of sort of the front desk experience.
Okay.
Where you're starting to see this now, where people can get digital keys beamed to their phone.
Got it.
And then they can just walk in the hotel, find
We're losing something there, John.
Well, I think so too. I do. And for us, I think our front desk is a value add because
it's also an opportunity for you.
Exactly. It gives people a chance to welcome them, tell them a little bit about the property, all that kind of stuff, rather than this very kind of faceless, transactional, here's your key, here's your room, good luck, right?
Good luck.
But that's one of the things that I could foresee coming, and you could see some of the bigger hotel companies saying, well, we can save a lot of money by instead of having 5 people on overnight, we'll just have one who's bouncing around the property doing different things, but not necessarily monitoring the phone or doing the front desk. So you could see that happening, and then the other thing you've seen since COVID, and this one sticks in my craw a little bit, but hotels are, kind of doing away with housekeeping on a daily basis.
I know. Let's go there for a second. It's a good observation. Yeah. So how does that work now? Is that it's kind of an optional thing?
Well, not even that. So, some places when you check in, they say unless you're staying 3 nights, you're not going to get housekeeping while you're here. We'll get you some new towels or if you want. And I'm like, you're still charging the same amount for the room, but you're not doing any housekeeping. Excuse me. I see that as very, very bad service. And it's cost cutting. And it's been in some cities, especially in Los Angeles, there's been a lot of rancor about it with some of the service unions.
Sure.
Because housekeepers feel like they're getting their hours cut, or they're just the number of jobs are being reduced.
Right.
Because they're just doing away with the service altogether. At our place, kind of what we do is it's an opt out, basically, is what it is. So we hand people a sheet, and it's like our default is we're going to service your room. But if you prefer, some different level of housekeeping, let us know.
Right.
And mark this down and then just give us the sheet and we'll make a note of it.
But your default is to provide that daily service.
That's correct, yeah. Yes. And I think people appreciate that. I've seen a lot of griping about
no doubt
kind of a reduction in service. And I stay in plenty of hotels myself, and I like coming back to a room that's been serviced, and
isn't that part of the experience?
Well, right. Plus,
Traditionally,
it makes you, makes you a little bit more responsible too to clean your own stuff up too, so that you're doing your part.
It does kind of put the onus on the guest to a degree. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to put your hairbrush back in the in the shaving kit and that kind of thing.
Well, we were taught by our grandparents when we used to travel as we were younger. We would learn to tip the housekeepers. We would learn to leave the $5 or $7 under the pillow. That was a thing that we learned as children from our grandparents, not our parents, our grandparents. But they're losing out. I mean, that's less revenue opportunity. Not that everybody tips, but those that do, I mean, they're losing out.
Yeah. And not only a substantial amount. I mean, typical tip is, anywhere from $1 to $5 a room.
Yeah.
And our housekeepers, we probably the most rooms they do in a day would be 10. That would be a lot.
Right.
But if they did 8,
absolutely,
that's $40
correct
in revenue that they just put in their pocket.
It just seems short-sighted by the industry in general. I mean, it seems like cost-cutting thrown to the forefront. But the public seems to, it's funny, John, we're getting conditioned to expect less.
That's correct.
Like fast food, we don't go often, but I go in once in a while to get a Diet Coke, and sometimes I go into a fast food place and pick any of them. Sometimes, not always, but you walk in, there's a newer front area where there's no one waiting behind a counter, and there's screens, and I'm not a fuddy-duddy. I'll use them, but it's like I just want to give like the $2, give me the cup, and I'll pour my own drink if I have to. But we're just losing something. Like when I used to go grocery shopping at a place in Pittsburgh here, and I'm trying to remember the name of that, where you had to find boxes and bags to bag your own stuff before you would leave. And I used to kind of piss me off. I spent a couple $100 on groceries and I have to bag them myself. Or IKEA had that 35 years ago in the States, right? You basically had to bag your own stuff.
Right. Or Sam's Club.
Sam's Club, same thing. Yeah. So, I mean, am I being too obnoxious to kind of like be put off by that? I mean, should I just assimilate and just do it and this is what it is? Or should we ask for or almost somewhat demand a level of service if we're paying a premium?
I think it's worthwhile doing and letting your opinion known, because otherwise people at the businesses, by and large, will, default to an average. It's not the better for you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think airlines are doing the same thing to a degree. It seems, and I get it. But it's all under the guise of, they sell it to us as if it's just a faster, easier, quicker way to do it. And is the public getting, like you mentioned earlier, they're just getting used to not having so much human interaction that they're kind of okay with it. No, that's the scary part.
Well, and there's also like the kind of the frog boiling aspect to it too, which is, and I think your point about the airlines is a good one, where they have squeezed down the amount of leg room between rows to the point where, I'm 6'2", and if somebody reclines their seat in front of me, they immediately hit my knees.
Exactly.
And, I pray that whoever's in front of me is not going to recline the seat. But still,
right.
A lot of this is on the airline because they're sacrificing guest comfort or customer comfort for basically economic considerations. And
we're like cattle now.
Right. And at some point, what do you stack us up like cordwood then, right?
Don't give them any ideas. I mean, wasn't there an airline, I'll jog your memory, mid-'80s, there was a airline, wasn't it People's Airway?
People Express.
Wasn't there a plan that was nixed by the FAA, but there's a plan for standing flights? Do you remember that?
I don't.
Yeah, they were going to have a section that was standing room for shorter flights, less than 90 minutes or something. They were going to stand people.
What
I'm surprised you haven't got to that.
What possibly could go wrong?
Did you have a good time, my friend?
This is great, man.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back, man.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I have. We do some business shows, and we have a lot of fun here. But I think if you have it in your schedule and time, and I present the right format to you, maybe come back for a panel show.
I'd be delighted. It's funny. I am busy, but my schedule's pretty flexible. Is a good thing. So.
Well. And I appreciate it. Just means a lot to me that you did this. I know how busy you are, but I've wanted this conversation for a long time.
Well, it's been really fun.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear. All right, partner. And again, what are the major websites to reach you?
So our main websites are thepriory.com,
right?
Mansionsonfifth.com,
thepriory.com.
Yeah, the Priory, and Pittsburgh's Grand Hall. Pittsburgh spelled out. Pittsburghsgrandhall.com. Those are our main sites.
And Instagram. Now, do you have a personal Instagram page, or is it the Priory page?
I have one, but I don't think I've ever posted anything.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I got banned from Twitter, and they're like,
"You're not on."
They banned me for like a week or something. I was like, I've never posted anything ever. I've never retweeted. Who knows? I don't know.
Man. I think it's called X now, anyways.
Yeah, I'm confused.
But if you just type in Priory on Instagram, they'll find that page.
They will. Yes.
Yeah, and then
your Mansions on Fifth.
Good deal. We'll have you back, friend.
Good stuff.
Again, thank you very much.
Absolutely.